Hello, thank you all very much for coming today. Welcome to the San Francisco Public Library, and welcome to our discussion this afternoon, President Obama, Accomplishments, Criticism, and Commentary. First, I'd like to thank everyone here for coming. I would also like to highlight some individuals that brought this event to you. Thank you to the African American Interest Committee of the San Francisco Public Library, led by Linda Brooks Burton, who's right there, and the whole African American Interest Committee for their work on this presentation. I would also like to thank Black Women Organized for Political Action, who graciously are partnering with us to host a voter information and education table for the event. They're located right outside. If you're not registered to vote or you just need voter information in general, you can speak with them. There is also a Department of Elections person, I believe, there as well. Of course, we'd like to thank our host as well as our distinguished panelists for joining us today and agreeing to provide their insight. Unfortunately, Ms. Cohen could not join us this afternoon because she received a last-minute invitation to the Congressional Black Caucus meeting in Washington, D.C., whatever they do. We're hosting this event because we've wanted to highlight the issues that may concern you as the voting public. We also wanted to allow our panelists the opportunity to chime in using their immense knowledge of public policy to propel this discussion. The committee felt that emphasizing voter empowerment and access to information was very important leading up to this election. The conversation of our panelists will last about 1.5 hours, and then we'll leave time at the end for question and answer. We will provide index cards in which you can write down your questions. Now, as we move along, I'd like to introduce Mrs. Barbara Rodgers. To get the presentation started. Mrs. Rodgers is one of the most recognizable newscasters in the media, formerly a newscaster with CBS 5 Eyewitness News. She started at the station in 1979 and quickly became an award-winning anchor, reporter, and show host. Before leaving CBS 5 in 2008, she was co-anchor of Eyewitness News at noon and host of Bay's Sunday, a weekly public affairs program. Mrs. Rodgers has received numerous honors for her work and community service, including a Lifetime Achievement Award from the Northern California Radio Television News Directors Association in 2008, a Frederick D. Patterson Outstanding Individual Award from the United Negro College Fund, also in 2008, the John Gothberg Award for Outstanding Contributions to the Northern California chapter of the Society of Professional Journalists, 7 Emmy Awards from the Northern California chapter of the National Association of Television Arts and Sciences, 5 Excellence in Journalism Awards from the National Association of Black Journalists, and awards for reporting from Associated Press, United Press International, and the Society of Professional Journalists. We're honored to have her lead this discussion today, and we thank her for her contributions and leadership in her field. Her work is inspirational and trend-setting, so please help me welcome Mrs. Barbara Rodgers.
Thank you. How's everybody? Good. Let me get just organized here. And thank you all for coming out today. Go Giants, and my 49ers lost today. Oh, I know that's, for any of you who are big fans, that's probably not good news. It wasn't good news for me. But I'm happy that you took some time to come by because this is a very important election. In fact, every election is important. But we do know that this is a particularly important year. How many of you remember exactly where you were on November 4th, 2008? Most everybody. It's one of those kind of pivotal nights. I remember it well. A friend of mine and I, another African-American female, we were at a restaurant on Fillmore Street, and we were watching the returns. They had a big screen. And when the word came that Barack Obama had been elected president, there was, of course, a lot of cheering, and then we went out in the street, and there were people honking horns like it was New Year's Eve, and people were just smiling, and there were people who came up to us on the street and were hugging us, and they were all white people who came up to us on the street, and they were hugging us and saying, congratulations, congratulations, as though we had won, you know. But we all did have that feeling that we had won something, that this was a particularly long battle that was culminating in something that was really the prize that we had been looking for a very long time. I also was in Washington, D.C. on January 20th, 2009 to watch Barack Obama become President Barack Obama. And I felt, you know, like so many other people there, this sense of not only pride, but real accomplishment. So now we said, before he got his socks and shoes moved into the White House, the honeymoon was over. Already he was getting slings and arrows thrown at him. So the question is, what happened, what went wrong, and who's to blame for what happened? So today we have this wonderful panel that is going to look at President Barack Obama accomplishments, criticisms, and commentary. And I'm going to introduce them, and as I introduce them, I'd ask you to hold your applause, and as I introduce each one, just come up and take one of the seats here. Our first panelist is Professor Robert Smith. He is a professor of political science at San Francisco State University. In addition to his teaching and research, he lectures widely and frequently discusses American and African American politics in local and national media. He is author or co-author of more than 40 articles and essays and 9 books, including Race, Class, and Culture, a study in African American mass opinion, Racism in the Post-Civil Rights Era, Now You See It, Now You Don't, and African American Leadership. He is associate editor of the National Political Science Review and has taught African American politics and American government for more than 30 years. His Encyclopedia of African American Politics was published in 2003. Professor Smith's latest book is Conservatism and Racism, and Why in America They Are the Same. Our second panelist is London Breed. She is executive director of the African American Art and Cultural Complex in San Francisco's Western Addition. She was appointed to that position in August of 2002 by former San Francisco Mayor Willie Brown. During her tenure as executive director, London has secured over $2.5 million in capital improvement funding for the complex, and in 2009, she led the organization through a $1.5 million renovation. A staunch community activist, London has dedicated her life to empowering and improving the plight of her Western Addition neighborhood. London is the recipient of numerous awards, including the Martin Luther King Jr. Community Service Award and the Geraldine Johnson Community Advocate Award. She is a native San Franciscan and currently serves as commissioner for the San Francisco Fire Department and is a candidate for the San Francisco Board of Supervisors from District 5. Our next panelist, I don't believe he has come in yet, so we'll just skip over JR, is Theo Ellington. Theo Ellington was born and raised in San Francisco, where he graduated from School of the Arts High School. It was there that he developed a deeper passion for social justice issues and public service. In 2005, Theo directed and produced his first short documentary called The Homeless Orchestra. This 2-part short documentary played in several film festivals, including a viewing at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. Theo has continued his commitment to public service by serving on the San Francisco Youth Commission and now is an active member of the Southeast Community Facilities Commission. He currently serves as president of the Black Young Democratic Club of San Francisco. And our last panelist is Lynette Sweet, and we thank her for stepping in for Malia Cohen at the last minute. Lynette is a BART board director, and she is currently running for re-election. She is a Bay Area native of San Francisco. She was a banker who was tapped by former Mayor Willie Brown to become president of the San Francisco Redevelopment Commission. In her spare time, and I'm surprised she actually has any, she runs an organization called PAC, which is a college placement organization which was started in 1963 to place Black children in college. She is now the executive director of that organization. Please welcome our panelists. So I'd like to start out because we talked about how we all were so excited on that day in 2008 when we saw the word come across that Barack Obama had been elected president. So I'd like for you to just travel back in time for 4 years to that day and to the day that he took the oath of office. And very quickly from each one of you, I'd like for you to tell me what were your expectations on that day that this president would be able to do? What was it that you were hoping would happen? And we'll start with you, Dr. Smith.
I actually didn't think he was going to be able to accomplish very much because I did not think the Democrats would have a filibuster-proof majority in the Senate. I assumed they would have at most 58 seats, and therefore his first 2 years would be much like his last 2 years have been. That is, a lot of talk and back and forth, but not much in terms of substantive accomplishments. But in fact, luckily, he ended up with 60 seats in the Senate and was able to achieve a quite substantial record of domestic reform. So in a sense, I was surprised that he was able to get the 60 votes in the Senate. Once he got that, I think he was able to use that quite effectively in his first 2 years to accomplish quite a bit.
All right, London.
I totally agree. I was a little concerned about Congress and the president's ability to accomplish much through policy because of that same reason, but also my hope as someone who's worked in the Western Addition and as someone who has seen over the years large amounts of African American men be killed in this district by other African American men. I just wanted young men to see themselves in President Obama. That was part of what I had done as a director and working in the community and always using that as an example. Sadly, we've not made significant progress on that front. The work that I do in the Western Addition community in particular has a lot to do with working with this population. So I was hoping that it would be something that was more, I guess, tangible in the community, more tangible than it has been. So in addition to, the accomplishments on policy matters.
And we'll talk more about that in a minute in terms of what actually happened to your expectations, but right now just the expectations. And Theo, what was your expectation in 2004? 2008, I'm sorry.
Gotcha, no, 2008.
2008.
I really didn't have any expectations. I think I had to be by myself that night that I found out he won the nomination, and I was in awe. Just because, as London alluded to, the symbol of an African-American male being the most powerful man in the world. I definitely saw myself in Obama, and he was one of the main reasons why I continued to push public service, continue to give back to my community. So the expectations were, I think he got there, so that was enough for me at that given moment. So, and I'm still in awe every time I see him speak. It's one of, this man is really our president. So.
Okay. And Lynette, what were your expectations?
Well, 2008 was kind of interesting for me because I was also running for re-election at that time as well. And I was looking at the returns as they came in because I was really interested in the president. That was totally important. But personally for me, I was looking at my race. Did I win? I'm still sitting here, so I won. But my expectation at that point really was what could happen differently here in California that would make a difference in my life. And the one thing that I really expected him to do was look at our Prop 209 and see if there was some way we could get rid of it and do something different. That's really what I expected him to do. That's really what I still expect him to do. And my hope is that, we have a chance that he can come back and do it. As a politician, when you see your name on a ballot with the first black man running for president who has an opportunity to win, it's just mind-blowing. So there was just a whole lot going on that night. But again, my expectation was getting rid of Prop 209.
So it seems that all of you were inspired by this win, but didn't have particularly high expectations. You really weren't expecting a lot. So given that, now that you have gone through the 4 years, my next question is, what do you think has been the president's greatest accomplishment over these 4 years? And maybe we'll start, London, with you on this one.
Well, I think one of the things that I'm really happy about is that by becoming the first African American president of the United States, there were a lot of barriers, I think, that were just really broken down. And I know that during the president's campaign, the issue of race, of course, aired its ugly head when the Republicans came after him and tried to use Jeremiah Wright as a way to aggressively take him down from a racial perspective. And they were unsuccessful because, true to form, President Obama demonstrated leadership when he gave the speech that he did on race, which basically brought out America's what's the best of America, and sometimes some of the worst things in America, things that we don't necessarily like to talk about, but he put all of that front and center. And so I think one of his biggest accomplishments has been to basically be the kind of president that's the president, not the black president, not the white president, but the president of the United States. And that means he represents everyone. And at that moment, I truly believe that he was the best person for the job, because I knew that regardless of any decisions he made as president, I could trust him, because it's not going to be a decision based on one group of people, but what's in the best interest for Americans. So I think that, as far as I'm concerned, is his biggest accomplishment.
Theo, how about you?
I think it's hard to pinpoint one, particularly given just the complexity of the past 4 years. But I would have to say, during the 2008 campaign, Obama vowed to end the war in Iraq, and I really didn't believe that he could do it, given how involved we were in the war. But we've seen that he did actually end the war, and we're starting to see troops from Afghanistan leave, and we've also, of course, seen the bin Laden, the elimination of Osama bin Laden. So I think if I had to pinpoint one, it would be ending the war in Iraq.
Okay. Lynette?
Well, I have to agree with both London and Theo that those were very good accomplishments that President Obama has had in his last 4 years. But if you look at the world and how it's changed in the last 4 years, the one thing that you can really look at and see where it's really impacted lives all over the world, not just in the United States, would be his stance on gay marriage. It's something that really had its life started here in San Francisco. And what you see now is this blossoming all over the world, where it's something that's being embraced, and people are looking at folks as, it's what you do in your bedroom. It's not what I do, so go ahead and do it. I mean, it's kind of like everybody's saying, love who you want to love and just be happy in that. And the fact that our president has taken that stance as well is huge, in my opinion, because all this hate in the world is where it's gotten us to where we are. So let's start looking at how we can embrace each other's differences and get along.
All right. And Professor Smith, what do you think has been the president's greatest accomplishments so far?
I think the passage of the health insurance legislation, that's a deeply flawed and compromised piece of legislation, but it was the best that he could get. And presidents since actually Theodore Roosevelt have been trying to do something to provide adequate health insurance to the American people. And this piece of legislation, if it is implemented, gives promise of going virtually all the way there. And this is a major achievement. The Supreme Court gutted a good part of it with its ruling on the Medicare expansion. But I think historians will look back and say, if he's reelected, and if this legislation is implemented, it will be of the same magnitude as Roosevelt's Social Security or Johnson's Medicare. So I think that's his major policy achievement.
Okay, so a varied list there from being a good leader and being really presidential, being president for all the people, from ending the war in Iraq and killing bin Laden, the Obamacare, as he has now embraced that title himself because he said, yes, he does care, so he's happy to call it Obamacare, and from changing the tenor of the debate on gay marriage and not just gay marriage, but also for gays in the military. So then what have you looked at and said, I'm really disappointed that this didn't get done in the first 4 years, if anything. And Theo, on this one, we'll start with you. What's been your biggest disappointment from this president? And if you had no disappointment, tell us why you have not had any.
Gotcha. So I think it was back in late 2010, we witnessed President Obama extend the Bush-era tax cuts for folks making $250,000 a year or more. I think that was my biggest disappointment, because going back to 2008, there was a lot of campaigning around ensuring the wealthy pay their fair share. And I think at this time, the Democrats, they were in a vulnerable position because there was a need for the unemployment benefits to be extended. I think they were set to expire within days, I think, of a vote. And it was kind of bittersweet because, you know, on one side we had the Bush-era tax rates extended another year, but then on the other hand we had unemployment benefits extended another 9 months, I believe. So kind of bittersweet, but I think I was a bit disappointed at that.
Okay. Lynette.
You know, although I really wanted something done about Prop 209 here in California, I can't say that I'm disappointed about anything that President Obama's done. And I'm saying that as a politician who realizes that, you know, when you're sitting in that big chair and you're trying to make those big decisions, it's real easy for people to throw arrows at you. It's real easy for people to criticize what it is you're doing. But what they don't understand is that you can't get everything done. Everybody's wishes are out there. You can have your priorities set, but you can't get everything done. This president has gone overboard in trying to get things done that would satisfy the entire American public. So to that end, I'm not going to say one doggone thing about him that I would be disappointed with, because this man has worked hard to get us where we are today.
Okay. Professor Smith.
Two, I think he made a terrible mistake in allowing the Republicans to hold the discussion of the budget hostage to the debt ceiling. That was a terrible precedent that he set, and he did not go before the American people and clearly explain what was going on and how really thuggish the Republicans were being and putting the nation's creditworthiness at risk in a routine budget debate. I think that was his biggest domestic policy mistake. Overall, I think his biggest mistake, however, was his decision to escalate the war in Afghanistan. I think that was a fool's errand, a terrible mistake, and we're still suffering the consequences of it. There is no Western or American solution to Afghanistan. That is a problem that the Afghan people will work out on their own one way or another. We're just wasting money and lives there. He's now beginning to withdraw the troops that he never should have sent in the first place, but I think that was a big mistake.
But to follow up on that before we go to London for her disappointment, whatever her disappointment might be, on the allowing the GOP to hold the debt ceiling budget talks, allowing them to use that to hold the country hostage, how would you have advised him to handle that differently? Since they had pretty much dug in their heels.
Well, first, he made a mistake because he did not anticipate it when he was making the arrangement on the extension of the Bush tax cuts. He was asked, why don't you include the debt ceiling in this, Mr. President, because the Republicans are likely to use that later on. And he said, oh, no, they would never do that. So that was just naivete on his part. And then once it was unfolding, I think he should have went to the Oval Office, made a speech, explained the nature of the debt problem that we have today, which is hardly of his making, and then explain to the country that I'm not going to let these people put the credit risk put the country's credit at risk. And if they want to play this game, I'll call their bluff. And then I think he could have shifted the responsibility, if they went ahead with it, to them. And I think they would have suffered the consequences. I don't think he led on that at all. And I think that's not only was a mistake in that particular instance, but I think it sets a bad precedent for people, a minority in one house of Congress, to hold the country's debt and creditworthiness hostages.
And he did eventually do that, go to the voters and say they are holding the country hostage. I think that was when things started to kind of turn around. Well,
we made a bad deal, too, in the end with these automatic budget cuts that are looming as soon as the election is over. But in the end, he salvaged a situation at the very, very end. And as you recall, there was a downrating of the nation's credit as a result of that. And I think they're poised to do it again. I think they won the last round, and I think this. So I think that was just a terrible error, or lack of leadership on that.
Okay. And London, your biggest disappointment, if any?
My biggest disappointment has been medical cannabis, and the fact that the U.S. Department of Justice has closed down cannabis clubs all over the state with very minor reasoning, things that include, for example, the vapor room, which was closed, and based on its proximity to a park from the back of the actual club, the regulations that are being used are just outrageous, and I'm truly disappointed in that. And many of us here in San Francisco, we know the importance of these places. It's not about getting high, it's about getting help, and getting help with dignity. And of all the people that are who tried to be president in the past or who are vying to be president now, for me, I would expect President Obama, of all persons, to really understand that this is important, and we need to really look at our laws around that and make sure that we address those things appropriately.
Following up on that, why, I know you're not inside his head, but why do you think he chose, or his Justice Department chose, to make that a target? Because that has been a criticism that has been leveled by a lot of people. It's sort of like you went after a problem that nobody was really complaining about. So what do you think made them crack down so much?
I don't know, but I think about the government as a whole and accountability and just the abuses around, people who are cheating their taxes, who are very wealthy and getting away with it, and there's no accountability to go after them. I think about, people who get significant amounts of federal dollars, and they're not being audited, they're not being regulated, and we're even discovering monies that have gone to different companies. I guess there was just recently a company here in the Bay Area that the FBI had investigated for wrongdoing around contracts. So I just think that there are bigger fish to fry from a federal standpoint, and we should be looking at accountability more on a larger level. And I wish I knew the answer to that, but it's still is something that makes absolutely no sense to me. And it looks like these clubs are being targeted for the wrong reasons. Because, for example, I mentioned the Vapor Room, very well-respected club in the Lower Haight. And they had security, they were well-run, but also they took care of a lot of the businesses in the area to help deal with issues around crime. They ate at the restaurants, they were great community neighbors. And I mean, that's just an example of how it's supposed to be done, where it fits into a neighborhood. And unfortunately, that doesn't seem to matter to the U.S. Department of Justice, which happens to fall under our president. And my expectation in moving into this second term is that we really look at changing policies so that these kinds of things don't happen moving forward.
Okay. Our next question is, how do you think being an African American has affected President Obama's ability to govern? And give a specific example, if you have one, of how you think it has affected his ability to govern. And we'll start with you, Lynette.
Wow. You know, we have a very able-bodied leader in Barack Obama. The fact that he's African American shouldn't make a difference, but it obviously does. The fact that he, as a black man, wants to get things done that would better this country seems to have hit the raw nerve of a lot of folks in this country who don't think that that should be something that an African American man does. Now, that's just Lynette Sweet's opinion. It may or may not be the truth, but what I can say is that someone who, like myself, is sitting in a position where I'm on a board where there is only one African American, myself. And when issues that come up surrounding race, I get painted with this picture of, well, all you want is to help black folks. Well, no, what I want to do is help everybody, and it's just unfortunate that we're getting the worst end of the deal, and that needs to be recognized. I think that's one of the problems that I see with President Obama as well. He wants to do more, but he can only work within the constraints of the rules that are laid out today. If he were not African American, and again, Lynette Sweet's opinion, if he were not African American, I think we would be looking at an economy that is much better than it is. I think we'd be looking at bipartisanship working as opposed to not working. I think we'd be looking at Congress and Senate trying to work harder together. I just think that there's so many things that have happened over these last 4 years that can be directly attributed to his race, that it's unfair for us as just voters to take race out of the equation and not look at that as, this is real, this is really what's going on. I don't know if that's ever going to change, and I don't know if we're going to be able to overcome it in the next 4 years. But what I do know is that this man needs to be given the chance to do it. This man has brought a level of intelligence to the presidency that, in my lifetime, I just don't remember seeing. So it just begs to question all of us. Are we willing to give him that chance as president and take race off the table? And Barbara, I don't think I answered your question directly, but what I can tell you is that if you're asking me if it makes a difference that Barack Obama is black, yes, it does.
Okay. Theo?
So I don't think President Obama has allowed this discussion or criticisms of him being African American to hinder his ability to be president. I think he set the tone very early, even back in 2008 when he was running for president. He set the tone when Jeremiah Wright, those videos went viral. He set the tone early when Michelle Obama made comments about black men being walking around with the fear of being shot no matter where you are. So I think he did a great job of making sure that he was the president of all people and not coming across as the angry black guy, not coming across as a president who wants to get things done just for one set of people. So I think he's handled this with patience, eloquence, and I think it's something that should be admired by both sides.
So do you think, though, that it's made him less effective or more effective or no difference?
Yeah, I don't think it's really made a difference.
Okay. London?
I actually agree with exactly everything that Theo has said. He's been a great leader for our country, and I think that there is, I think, what I love about San Francisco in particular is that there are so many different cultures, there are so many different people, and we all embrace that. And I think that now, with the new generation, for example, I went to Galileo High School, and when I went back to speak to the students there, they have a LGBT student club. And when I went to high school, I won't say what year, but I mean, everyone knew, but no one talked about it. So the people who were gay could not talk about it, could not express it, and didn't feel comfortable about just being themselves. And we've evolved overall as a people. I mean, well, I guess we've evolved in San Francisco because we're a lot different from other parts of the country. But I think that what I really love about having this president who's African American and watching the next generation come of age is that we are a culture as Americans that celebrates those differences, and it's amazing to see how kids nowadays, it's not that big of a deal to them whether their friends are black or white or any other kind of race or any other kind of difference. It's embraced more. And I think as years go by and as we continue to fight the good fight and make sure that there's no tolerance for any kind of discrimination or hate of any nature, then I think we'll get to a better place. But right now as a country, in a lot of ways, he probably would have gotten a lot farther had he not necessarily been just African American. But you just only time will get us past all of this.
Okay, and Professor Smith.
I'm not sure. Social scientists have been trying to delve into this with all kinds of methodologies. They, for example, to a sample of Americans, described Obama's health care plan and then attributed it to Clinton and then attributed it to Obama. And there was much more opposition to the same plan when it was attributed to Obama than to Clinton. So we know, and Obama himself has said privately that he thinks some of the opposition to him is because of race, particularly the Tea Party opposition. But my sense is it's relatively minor. My guess is the opposition to him is based on his ideology, the perception. He is a liberal. He's probably the most liberal person that could have been elected president. Is about as left as you can get and win. And he's governed in as much left as is possible in Washington. And I think conservatives in this country resent that simply for ideological reasons. So I recall that Bill Clinton, worse lies, in fact, were told about Bill Clinton. He was accused of being a drug pusher, a murderer. So I think the real animus toward Obama is more ideological than it is racial, although I think there is a racial element in it.
Okay. Our other panelist is here, and I'd like to bring him out now before we continue with our questions. He is J.R. Valrey. He is a man of many hats. He is a print journalist with the San Francisco Bayview newspaper, a broadcast journalist with Block Report, a radio program that is aired nationally on Pacifica Radio and locally on 94.1 FM. He's also an author and filmmaker. In 2010, J.R. authored his debut literary work called Block Reporting, which consists of 31 dynamic interviews with people like Cynthia McKinney, Mos Def, Freeway Ricky Ross, Mumia Abu-Jamal, Gil Scott-Heron, and more. His 2010 documentary, Operation Small Axe, was a Pan-African Film Festival selection, and his 2012 Block Reporting 101 was screened at this year's Oakland International Film Festival and the San Francisco Black Film Festival. His second book, Unfinished Business, Block Reporting 2, will be released later this year. He is a native of Oakland, California. Please welcome J.R. Valrey. And J.R., not to put you immediately on the spot, but since you are a little bit late and we have asked all of our panelists to tell us what their expectations were as Obama became president and what their disappointments were, maybe you could just give us a little summary of your feeling so we kind of know where you are. What was your expectation as he was elected president, and what has been your sense of any disappointment, if any, and any accomplishments, if any?
Well, I have two ways to answer that. One, I'll just start with the way my grandfather looked at it, and I understood what the election of or selection of Obama actually meant to the United States, particularly the black people that lived through the civil rights movement and pre-civil rights movement. So I understood the symbolism that Obama meant to people like my grandfather. But to people like myself, Obama is still over a capitalist, imperialist, white power system. Obama is over a country that kills black people every 36 hours. There was a recent study that came out. So whether it's Bush, whether it's Clinton, whether it's Obama, it's still 2 million black people in prison. There's still the American government is still pushing its weight all over the world. Most of, not all of Bush's programs overseas and dealing with foreign policy is still being pursued, dealing with drones, indefinite detention, deportations. Everything that Bush initiated is still going on under Obama. So I didn't really have any expectations. You can put a black face on white power, but it's still white power. And so that's how I look at Obama.
So your feeling is that nothing has changed?
Yes, that is my feeling, is that nothing significant has really changed.
Okay, does anybody else on the panel agree with that or disagree with that?
Well, I agree with his characterization. The American president is managing a capitalist, imperialist regime. And Obama's only promise, I think, was that he would manage it more efficiently than George Bush. But he never indicated, and no person could be elected president if he indicated that he intended to challenge that system in any way. So the broad outlines of your comments I agree with, but one cannot expect an American president to do any other than that. Their job is to manage efficiently the American imperial order.
Exactly.
Do you think he's managed it not only efficiently, but has he managed it more humanely?
Is that a question to the whole panel?
That's a question for anybody on the panel who wants to answer it.
Well, I would say that Obama opened up new fronts on the war that no president has overtly done. Obama has put boots on the ground in Libya. Obama has put boots on the ground in Uganda. Obama has put boots on the ground in Somalia. Obama has put boots on the ground in Mali. Obama has put boots on the ground in Egypt. So if you look at it for what it really is, it's really a NATO invasion of the whole continent led by Obama.
Anyone else want to comment on that, on the panel? Okay, then we'll move on. Our next question, then, we were moving up to talking about how race has affected his presidency and his ability to govern. And in general, our panelists felt that while it has affected him, it has not kept him from governing. And Professor Smith, in fact, said that he thought it was more an ideological kind of opposition than it is an opposition to race. But clearly we have seen some overt racism coming out of some corners. Some have mentioned the Tea Party already. There are others who have said things that were overtly racist. How would each of you advise the president to deal with racism when it does rear its ugly head? And we'll start, Lynette, we'll start with you.
Thank you. And you know what? I don't think there's any answer I could give this president on how to deal with racism when it rears its ugly head, because he sees it rearing its ugly head several times a day. I think anybody of color who is in this country sees racism rearing its ugly head. All you can do is deal with it as best you can as it comes at you. Again, I've talked about me being in the political arena and the fact that it's there. It's covert sometimes and it's overt many times. The covert stuff you really can't do a whole lot with because it's kind of under the covers and you're not supposed to see it directly. The overt stuff you can address, but it's all in how you address it and what words you're using to either counter or get away from it. But I don't think this president needs a lesson from any of us because he's done it. I mean, he's done it repeatedly. When we witnessed his first State of the Union address, and you have a senator yelling at the President of the United States, "You lie." That's something that had never happened. That protocol had never been broken before, but this senator felt empowered that he could do it. And again, a Lynette sweet opinion on this one, but he felt empowered because that was a black man standing there. He felt he could do that. It never would have happened before. So again, I don't think there's a lesson or anything we could tell Barack Obama on how to deal with it because he's dealing with it, and he's dealing with it on a level that none of us can ever understand.
JR, I take it you're going to disagree with that because you have some criticisms of him, so I assume that means you have some advice on how he could do things differently.
Well, I look at it from a whole different viewpoint, and I'm not looking at the individual attacks at Obama. I mean, he knew he was coming on to the top of a white power system. He knew what to expect, probably even more than we do, like you said in the introduction. But what I look at it as, Obama needs to stop being an aid to white supremacy, particularly Obama's first military act as president of the United States was killing the Somali pirates. Do you guys remember that? His first military act was killing people who the United States government and other NATO powers have destroyed their government, have overfished in their fishing lanes, refused to pay these people, and dumps nuclear waste in their waters. And when these people are reduced to having to hijack ships, he had them shot on national TV, basically. And so when we look at race and we talk about Obama, see, I think it's like throwing the pebble the other direction, where we could talk about how they make monkey cartoons about him and stuff like that. Obama knew it. He knows what America is. He volunteered for this. His mother was CIA. His mother knew what this was about. I mean, she was a main architect to what the United States foreign policy in Indonesia is, what's going on with that. His father was in the Maboya government in Kenya. So Obama knows how this thing moves. And he wouldn't have become United States president had he not been someone who enabled the United States government to move the way it does under blackface. I was in Libya 3 weeks before the NATO bombing, and they were cheering Obama. They didn't realize that 3 weeks later it was going to be bombs on the ground in Tripoli, destroying the whole city. But he was able to do it under blackface, where if it was done under George Bush, we would have seen it coming a mile away. But people in the continent, people in the United States, I mean, I was listening to the panel when I came in all the way to when I got up here. I didn't hear too many criticisms for Obama. So to me, he's a public relations success story for the United States government. They got a chance to wrap their imperialism in black Christmas paper, and for the most part, we bought it.
So I gather your view it would be better for America and the world that there never would be a black president.
Say it one more time.
There would never be a black president.
I don't understand the question. Please repeat the question.
That in your view it would be better for black people in the world that a black person not be president of the United States.
Well, I didn't say that. I just think that the real issues in the United States has to be addressed. I'm not necessarily a pusher of neocolonialism, if that's what you're asking. Wait, hold on, let me finish. So when you talk about somebody like Nelson Mandela, no, I don't think that Nelson Mandela should have been president of South Africa, be it that he didn't have his hand on all of the different aspects of the country, and he let the apartheid government get off the hook by using him as a front piece.
So it sounds to me...
I'm talking about whether or not an American president, I think as you alluded to, necessarily is going to be doing pretty much what Obama is doing, particularly in international affairs. So since that is the case, even the symbolic benefit that you said your grandfather drew from his election, you would suggest that the negatives of having a black face manage this outweighs the symbolic benefit of having a black president.
Well, I think that just like Kwame Nkrumah, the first president in Africa, of Ghana, who just recently celebrated his birthday a few days ago, says that neocolonialism is the last stage of capitalism. Neocolonialism is the last stage of capitalism. So when they have to put it in blackface, that's the last stage before we actually get what's coming to us, whether that be justice or not. So I do invite the fact that it's neocolonialism, because that means that we're one step closer to getting justice, and we're one step closer to understanding the U.S. government and what's going on internationally. So I say that I think that is good.
What is good?
The fact that we are at a point of neocolonialism in this country, the same way that apartheid South Africa was at a point of neocolonialism when they did it under Mandela. So then it helped the people to understand what we're up against. We don't need a black face to symbolize white power. White power is white power, whether it's a black face, a brown face, a white face, a woman, a homosexual, whatever. It's still going to push the same agenda if we don't fundamentally change and alter the way in which it relates to us in our everyday reality.
And are you saying that change is supposed to come from the person at the top or from the people at the bottom?
I didn't really state where I said it was going to come from, but I think that the real change, it'll come from many different sectors of the society. I don't think a society I don't think a society changes without all the different sectors being affected and it being initiated on many different levels. If we look at different times in this country, such as the 60s, that's a prime example. There were things moving on the university level. There were things moving in Vietnam, in the fields of Vietnam and the jungles of Vietnam. And there were also things moving in the street as well as in electoral arenas.
So you don't think the election of Obama represents any of that change?
Well, I think that, first, let's be for real on what we're talking about. Like, I don't like the word election because we didn't elect anybody. I don't think that anybody in this room is in the Electoral College. I mean, tell me if I'm wrong. Are any of you in Electoral College? Do any of you guys know anybody that's in the Electoral College? I think that makes my point. What it is that you guys vote for is the popular vote. That is very different from the electoral vote. And if you watch even major network news, they'll tell you that. I mean, you could just take the root word, popular, electoral, and the electoral vote is the one that actually selects the president. There are less than 500 people in this country that actually vote for president of the United States.
Okay, but you do know that the electoral votes are awarded based on the popular vote.
Well, actually, it happened 6 times in history where the electorate voted against the popular vote. Wait, let me finish.
The most recent time in each state, not the combined.
No, but I'm talking about the whole thing. I'm saying the most recent time was during George Bush, where Al Gore was actually supposed to win the popular contest, but the electorate felt like they needed to defend their interests, and they rose up against the popular vote. So I think, we have to make sure that people understand all of those aspects of history when we talk about the selection of Barack Obama.
Okay, but just to be clear, it's not based on the combined popular vote, but they are awarded the electoral votes based on the popular vote in each individual state. So the total may add up to something different. So you're half right on that. All right, let's continue with, I think, London, you were next in terms of any advice you might give to the president on how he might deal with any racist attacks.
I think that, I think the president dealt with it when he made his speech on race. And, it's just something, we all deal with, I'm sure, some level of discrimination in various capacities, whether it's ageism, sexism, discrimination for so many different reasons. And as the president, he has to be he has to provide the leadership, and his leadership has been to focus on doing what is in the best interest of the American people and addressing issues that he believes need to be addressed publicly for whatever particular reason, and moving on. So at this point, I just think that there's no point in dwelling over it. It's more important that we actually grow, that we participate as citizens of this world in trying to make society better. That we know, many of us, I know personally, I've witnessed the problems in my community, and instead of being someone to point the finger at the mayor or the board of supervisors, I got involved myself, and I started taking on responsibilities of working with the population who needed the support the most. And in a lot of ways, I'm very effective, but I realized that on a policy level, I could be much more effective. And so I just think that everyone has their own opinions, they have their own abilities, and personally, I don't know what kind of advice I could actually give the president, but I know on a local level, my advice to myself is to move forward and to not dwell on it, and to, more importantly, be an example, being a living example of how you treat other people regardless of race.
And Theo?
I think that they both, Lynette Sweet and London Breed, touched on just how Obama's leadership in general will be kind of his ticket to handle race. I think he's done a tremendous job thus far, and there's not much. You guys covered it all.
Okay, JR, you already answered this question, but if you'd like to add something, yes.
Yeah, I would like to expand on it. I would like to hit it from where they hit it from. The first time that I remember Obama addressing race, besides his military action, was the first Father's Day of his presidency, when he addressed black men, and he had such a condemning tone to what he had to say. That was one. Then I remember him addressing race on...
Now remember, the question is, what would be your advice to the president?
Well, let me just state where I'm coming from first, and I'm going to get to my advice. Then the second time was when he went to Africa for the first time as president of the United States, right after the bailout, when he gave the banks over $700 billion, and then he went straight to Africa and called them corrupt governments. So what my advice to Obama about race would be is to address it head on. Address it truthfully and sincerely, and without any United States government policy objectives, and I think he would have more integrity, and at least we would be knowing that we're dealing with a sincere, truthful man that is trying to deal with corruption, but not when he gives $700 billion away and then he condemns African governments. I think that that's hypocritical. So I would tell him to stop being hypocritical.
All right. The next question is, and we'll start with you, Professor Smith, for this one. Do you feel that the election, or President Barack Obama being president, has changed the way white America views black people in general? If so, how do you think it's changed it? And if not, why not?
First, you didn't give me a chance to answer the question of how he should address.
Oh, I thought you did. I'm so sorry.
No, I didn't get a chance to answer.
But go right on what would be your advice?
I think on racism directed toward him, things addressed to him because he is black. I think he said this earlier in the campaign, he should do the Jay-Z, which he quoted Jay-Z and said, just it off, don't pay attention to it. Because there's nothing he can do if he addresses racism directed toward him except inflame it and make it more difficult for him to govern this broadly multiracial country that is after all majority white. And a president, if he seeks to be president, necessarily has to consult the opinion, however he may not like those opinions, of his constituents. And the president's constituents range from people like JR all the way over to unreconstructed white supremacists. And the task of any president, but particularly the task of a black president and a progressive black president, is to manage those tensions in such a way as he is able to move forward his agenda. And I don't think he can move that agenda if he pays any attention to race. racism. I mean, not race. I mean race in the sense of race as a target toward him. Now, JR raises another question that we might get to later on in terms of how the president has chosen to address race in terms of the black community, in terms of how he's chosen to address race in that sense. But in terms of racism, I think the best thing to do is the old Jay-Z thing, just let it be and go on about your business.
Okay, and then the next question was, has his being president changed the way that whites in general view black folks or not?
Thus
far, there's no evidence that it has. In fact, the kind of polling data that political scientists like to rely on suggests that it's made hardly any difference whatsoever. That the kind of, for example, negative stereotypes that whites held about blacks prior to the president's election have not been altered in any way. So, if it may be having an effect on the children. I think it is necessarily making for a better country if young kids grow up thinking it is not anything remarkable that a black person is president. And I think that may, in the long run, have some positive attitudes in the socialization of young people. But in terms of adults, thus far, we've not seen any evidence that it has altered the negative stereotypes that whites and others have about blacks. Anybody else agree or disagree with that, or want to comment on that before we move on to the next question? Does everybody?
I think, yeah, just real quick. I think folks are going to have their stereotypes of what African American folks are supposed to look like, and vice versa. But I think that Obama and the Obama family can't do it alone. I think it starts with folks like us, folks like the people that are here in the room, really showing the success of what African Americans and what black folks can really do. So,
anybody else want to comment on that question before we move on to the next question? Okay. What grade would you give President Obama on his interactions with the black media and the black community, and does he treat the black media and the mainstream media differently? And why don't we start with you, London, on that one?
I'm not sure. I mean, I just can't tell because I read a lot of different stories. For example, the local stories that I read that are in the black press, there's a lot of information on things that Obama has done or is doing as president. I don't necessarily think that what I read in the black press centers around international relations and other things that are in more national news. I think I find that it's more social related and not necessarily policy related. So I think there might be, I don't know if that's a difference between what the president is putting out to the black press versus what the black press chooses to report. But I'm not in the world of the press, but from what I read, I just see there's definitely a difference in terms of what's being reported, and I don't know if is that coming from the press or is that coming from the Obama administration?
Theo?
No, London, I think you alluded to the social status of Obama, making Obama, putting a kind of a human face to him, or the human aspect to his presidency. I think a lot of times, at least from what I saw, the black media, they show that people can relate to President Obama, and we get to, I guess, see as much of the real him as we can. We see he's a personable guy. There's a lot of the pictures where he's giving the fist pump, or black magazines labeling Obama as the cool president. There's been times where Obama has mentioned he listens to Jay-Z. So there's stuff like that. I think that we see more so in the black media than anything else. One thing that I liked was, we heard Obama sing the Al Green song, which really, for me, put that human connection to the Obamas, and then to see that the Obamas can actually dance and have rhythm. So I don't know. It just the black media, I think, just puts like I said, the human factor.
Okay, Lynette.
It's kind of an interesting question because when you say the black media, I had the opportunity to listen to an interview that Barack Obama did with Steve Harvey last week on KPIX. Well, KPIX is owned by Intercom, which wouldn't be considered black media, yet it was probably one of the best, just getting down to the nuts and bolts of who he is type interviews that I've ever heard. I mean, he really spoke quite candidly with Steve Harvey. With the advent of the internet, I have to read about 20 newspapers a day, and you can tell kind of the slant of that newspaper just by virtue of their letters to the editor and some of the things that are on the front page. I don't know if they're mainstream or black media, but I do know that there are quite a number of papers in this country that can't stand Barack Obama and will go out of their way to paint him with a brush that really is unfair to this president. When you look at what Fox News does to him and how Fox News covers any and everything he does, there's a definite slant to it. So I don't know how to answer your question by saying, does the black press do something differently? Because we really don't know who owns what and how it's happening. But I do know that we do have a number of African American papers in the Bay Area that have given him pretty fair coverage and have done a good job to get his message out.
JR?
I didn't totally understand I forgot the question because I don't know if any of the, I don't think that any of the panelists answered it. But ask the question.
The question was, what grade do you give President Obama on his interactions with the black media and the black community, and does he treat the black media and the mainstream media differently?
Okay, let's address the questions. 1, I am a black journalist in the black media. Worked for San Francisco Bayview newspaper, which is black owned. Obama gets an F in dealing with the black press. Obama, the only reporter, I know a number of different reporters dealing with the black press, and I'm not talking about black people in the press, like Steve Harvey. Steve Harvey is not black press. When you say black press, you're talking about black reporters and broadcasters that work for black-owned institutions. Obama, the biggest newspaper in the United States is 2 of them. The biggest national black newspaper is The Final Call. The biggest geographic big newspaper is the Amsterdam News in New York. Nayaba Arende is the editor-in-chief of the New York Amsterdam News. She has not been able to get in touch with Obama since he has been president of the United States. Although when he was senator, she had open access to him. The Final Call has never, as far as I know, sat down and did a Q&A with Obama. So the black press hasn't dealt with Obama at all. When he came to the Bay Area, the Oakland Post, the San Francisco Bayview, we weren't called. We weren't dealt with. The KPOO, he wasn't on KPOO. So that's the local black press. But even in dealing with the national black press, he ignores us. So true to form, being the head of the white supremacist power structure, he did this. He gets about the same grade that George Bush gets.
Professor Smith? Professor Smith?
I would say, if you just wanted to do a grade, I would say probably B, maybe even B plus. The first post-election interview he gave was to Ebony magazine, and in terms of the national black media, he is accessible to them on a routine basis, not for any reasons other than he wants to stay in touch with his core black constituency, and he wants to do that through mainstream media, black media, which is mainly celebratory of him, and he knows that. There's no critical mainstream black press of Obama. Most of it is not just a presentation of the president, but a kind of a celebratory presentation of it. So I would give him high marks for calling on black reporters and stuff like that. He, of course, has not given an interview to Tavis Smiley. And Smiley has, been going around the country being very critical of has been very critical of the president from the beginning. He's one of the most prominent black people in the national media. And he's been very critical of the president. And I think the president would have been gracious and wise to have granted Smiley an interview. Smiley is not a particularly tough interviewer in the first place. And if he can sit down with one of his right-wing critics like, what's this guy on Fox TV, O'Reilly, twice I think he's given O'Reilly an interview, then I think he should give one of his most vociferous black critics in the media an interview as well. And so I think it was ungracious and somewhat churlish of the president not to give Smiley 15 minutes of his time, just so that to be fair-minded.
Okay. We're going to switch now to another topic, voting. The Brennan Center for Justice at the New York University School of Law reports that at least 180 restrictive bills affecting who and how a person can vote have been introduced since the beginning of 2011 in 41 states. It's estimated that these laws could keep as many as 5 million people, mostly minorities and low-income people, from voting. What do you think will be the effect of these so-called voter suppression laws on the election, and do you feel that enough is being done to combat them? And how about JR? We start with you.
Can you sum up the last part of the question?
Yes. I'll repeat the question.
What do I think about the voter suppression laws? And
what do you think will be the effect of the voter suppression laws on the election, and do you think enough is being done to combat whatever? There are some things going on in the courts and other things like that. Do you think enough is being done to combat them?
Well, I think that when we look at what the United States banking system and the major corporations that run the United States, when they want something, they get what they want. We saw that when voters were quote unquote suppressed in Florida in dealing with George Bush and later Ohio. No one was taken to jail. Nothing was really done when George Bush shouldn't have been handed the presidency based on the popular vote. I think that we're going to see a political theater. There's going to be a little bit of media behind it, but I think that the voters are, for the most part, going to be suppressed. I mean, they're going to put up a good theatrical fight, and I mean, a lot of them are going to sincerely fight, but I think that they're going to make the numbers reflect what they need to reflect, and we saw that with both selections of George Bush.
Okay. So you're saying that the effect on the election of these laws will be that there will be a number of voters who will be disenfranchised?
Yes, a large number. And
on the second part of the question, do you think enough is being done to combat that?
No, enough is not being done to combat it. I mean, but I think it depends on from what viewpoint are you asking? Are you asking from a viewpoint of someone who wants to participate and who thinks their vote counts? And no, enough is not being done. But do you think enough is being done from somebody who is trying to keep their agenda intact? I think, yeah, from that viewpoint, a large part of people that are eating the race baiting, in particular in dealing with this election to divide the electorate from really understanding what the common issues we have are, I think that they're going to be confused and they're going to allow a lot of the black voters that are being suppressed to be suppressed.
Okay. Professor Smith?
Yes, I think this is, although they obviously deny the Republican strategies, but I think they looked at the outcome of the last election, particularly the high turnout, relatively high turnout of blacks. In the last election, blacks voted almost at the same rate as whites, which is extraordinary because voting is generally a middle-class phenomenon. So that means that middle-class blacks outvoted middle-class whites and poor blacks outvoted poor whites. And I think they saw that. and the turnout of Latinos and the turnout of students, white students, and saw that was pretty much the basis of Obama's election. And they made an effort to try to do everything they could to suppress that vote the next time around. And some of this is quite transparent and really quite ugly in the way they're trying to do it. Some things are being done. Of course, the Obama campaign is trying to get people around these barriers of voter ID, and they're going to have a lot of poll watchers, and NAACP is doing that. But I think if the election is close in places like Pennsylvania and Florida, that we may in the end conclude that the president lost if he loses because of these voter suppression efforts. I think they're actually just that serious in several battleground states. And I think it's quite deliberate. I mean, I don't think there's any doubt. The Republicans, of course, say, well, this is just trying to protect the integrity of the ballot. But this is trying to suppress the voters that made Obama president, black people, Latinos, and young people.
Okay. Anyone else want to comment on that in London?
I just want to say that one of the steps in the right direction has been that Californians can now go online and register to vote. I think that's huge. Of course, there will always be things that try and suppress the vote. I know for the past several months, I've been actively registering people to vote, and it is definitely, a difficult thing to do with some people who feel like my vote doesn't matter, or what is this going to do, or I may not have a place to stay, so where am I supposed to put my address? I mean, there's a lot of various questions that people have, and if there isn't someone who is educated and understands all of the things of a ballot, which it took me a while to even understand everything that's actually required myself, it makes it difficult, because 10 of the voter registration cards we turned in because they might have been missing the last 4 digits of your social, or the California ID, or the date wasn't where the signature. I mean, little minor things where made it difficult to get people registered. And so I just think that there are some things that we need to do to make it a lot more simpler for people to register, and the fact that we can actually go online and register is a huge victory, huge step in the right direction.
Anyone else want to comment on that, Lynette?
Well, I think everybody here needs to really pay attention to what JR said, because the one thing that he said that has resonated with me is the fact that you asked, is enough being done? Well, yeah, enough is being done by the side that wants to suppress the vote. They're doing everything they can, and that's where we really have to get out and start doing more, because right now we're under fire. I mean, if they're able to do what it is they've tried to do, or what it is they're doing, we are going to lose quite a number of voters, and that can't happen. And does anybody else find it just kind of odd that suddenly we have to fix our voter laws? Suddenly, with this black president, we have to change things, that we're not doing enough to make sure people are registered. JR, I just want to commend you for saying that, because that is really the truth. We're not doing enough on one side to counter what's being done on the other side, and that's where we, as just people who want this to happen the right way, need to get out and educate folks on how to get this done right, and that they can vote.
Okay, and Theo?
Yeah, you hit the nail right on the head. I think, we have the Civil Rights Act, we have the 15th Amendment, we have all these things in place that are designed to protect the right to vote. But on the same token, voter suppression isn't anything new. We see this every time. Every time there's an election, there's voter suppression. So I think the issue is very serious. But as was mentioned earlier, Republicans will tell you that they're doing this purposely for students, so students won't show up, so black folks won't show up, so folks from community of colors won't show up. So it isn't anything new, and I'm surprised that there isn't Democrats aren't outraged at this.
Some are, and there are actually, this is kind of new in the sense that a lot of these laws have been enacted within the last 2 years. So there were always barriers, you're right, but these are some new barriers. In accordance with that, just let me say that while there's an estimated 5 million votes that could be suppressed, people who are willingly suppressing their own votes, much greater than that. According to an article that appeared in USA Today in August, an estimated 90 million, okay? Did you hear that number? 90 million eligible voters will not vote in November. 90 million people. Almost 60% of those surveyed said they are not voting because, quote, nothing ever gets done. A similar percentage, 54%, call politics corrupt. When asked who they would vote for, if they did vote, they chose President Barack Obama by more than 2-1 over Mitt Romney. So 90 million people who willingly are estimated not to vote. Now, I think we have some questions from the audience. Does somebody have the cards of the people who have asked questions from the audience? If you'd bring those forward, and while they're bringing those forward, I will ask a question about something else that has been a sort of a hot issue during this administration, the president's mortgage relief program. Do you think that the president has done enough to help homeowners who are underwater? And has he done too little to punish the banks? And we'll start with Theo, you.
So I think,
has he done enough to help homeowners who are underwater? In other words, it's the Main Street versus Wall Street argument. Has he done too little to punish Wall Street and too little to help Main Street, or do you think he's done enough?
got it. So I think, whether or not people believed it then,
It's safe to say that Obama's policies have left America better off, just as far as when you talk about mortgage relief and you talk about consumer protection. But it's difficult to look at, it's really hard to tell what effect his policies have had without looking at hard numbers. I think his diligence on the economy, like I said before, with the reform measures and consumer protection policies have worked, and we're going to slowly start to see the turnaround. And I definitely think that there's more work that needs to be done. Particularly what I found fascinating about Obama's policies was back when the recession was kind of the heart of the recession, back in 09, 010, there was a summit held to help emerging markets who really would have felt the kind of economic downturn. I forget the name of the exact policy, but there was a summit, and out of that summit there was a policy that helped emerging markets around building their economy, which in the bigger picture helps America as well.
Okay. Lynette?
In theory, the Mortgage Relief Act was wonderful. In theory, it was set up to help people who were underwater with their mortgages, and they would be able to get some relief, in theory. In practice, it failed miserably, and it only failed because no one held the bank's feet to the fire on getting that money to the consumers. What ended up happening was the banks were able to get rid of bad assets, and those were those loans that weren't being paid, by getting rid of those loans that weren't going to be paid and foreclosing on those homes. That's not what was supposed to happen. In theory, that money was supposed to go to those struggling homeowners to help them out of their crisis. It didn't happen. Now, I can't criticize Obama 100% for that one, because there are all these regulations that are out there that should have helped make the banks do the right thing. For whatever reason, we in this country have not figured out that it's the banks. If we don't hold them accountable, if we don't put deregulation, if we don't start regulating them better, we're gonna have the same problem over and over and over. It's not over now. The number of foreclosed properties just in the Bay Area, just in Bayview Hunters Point, is a prime example of the failure. Mm-hmm. There were people who could not afford those homes, yet they could afford to make payments. The easiest thing that could have happened was if you were making a $500 payment and your payment suddenly ballooned up to $3,000, you couldn't make that payment. The bank needed to work with you on how do we get you back down to $500? What is it going to take for you to make the payment that you could? The banks were already made whole. They were given money by the government. All they had to do was figure out how to make the consumers whole. And that didn't happen. So I guess, Barbara, and it kind of answered the question the right way, I'm not happy with that piece because there was such a simple solution that got convoluted in the implementation.
Okay, Jake.
I just wanted to add to that. You know, I'm totally in agreement with what Lynette said, and I think a big part of what we and what I mentioned earlier is the issue that I have, you know, with President Obama's presidency is accountability. Is accountability when we implement these policies. We need to make sure that there's follow through, that the resources are in place to hold people's feet to the fire. And I know that when President Obama first became president, there was the Jobs Now and federal funds that came in to get people hired. And I hired some of those people, and I basically tried with my small budget to carry some of those people on and on and on. But once that money was gone, it was gone. So how do we then move forward and hold people in those job opportunities or help them get placement? There's a disconnect. And I think with the situation that happened with people and the loans and what the president tried to do did not have that really important piece, and that is the connection between the actual dollars and the folks and the people most impacted by that.
Okay, anyone else want to comment on that? Go on, JR.
I agree with Lynette and what London had to say, but I disagree with about 20% of it. And I think that black people always look for a way to find out where Obama, he kind of messed up, or they got in there and they messed it up for Obama. Obama knew well that he works for the bankers. That's who put Obama, Wall Street is who put Obama in position. That's who put Obama in position. So when Obama gave this $700 billion to the banks, he didn't think that that money was going to us. Why he didn't give it to us? He sure sends those income taxes to us. He don't send them to the banks. He send them to us. So when money is about to be distributed to us, then he wants to use the banks. And then the banks don't even redistribute the money as you see what's going on with the economy. If he infused the economy with $700 billion, where's it at?
Okay.
Crickets. No, that was just done for effect. I'm not finished. So where's the money at? I think that what we're dealing with is somebody that is complicit in crimes against United States citizens and citizens of the world. And we're not dealing with that because he has a black face. Obama's a war criminal. I don't know if that's been said from the panel, but Obama's a war criminal, and my grandmother is a victim of that war. The fact that my grandmother doesn't have her house right now because of a subprime loan, and they did this little shell game called the bailout, and most of us bought it and said, oh, you know, well, Obama's trying, but they're stopping Obama. No, Obama's not trying, because if Obama was trying, why isn't Eric Holder arresting somebody?
Do you place all the blame at President Obama's feet?
Well, I know that he's the main spokesperson for the United States government. So just like when the professor, remind me of the professor's name? They got the one after Oscar Grant.
Gates?
Yes, just like when he called on Gates and what happened with Gates when Gates got roughed up and he called the police out and invited them to the White House. You know, that was, we saw some kind of resolution, and we saw the police get pointed out, but I looked at even that as part of the Pebble game where he had us looking over here, but Obama didn't address Oscar Grant. So Obama will address something very minuscule and put that public relations face and that spokesperson and that nice, beautiful smile and him being friends with Oprah Winfrey and him listening to Jay-Z. He'll put that out there to make us feel good, like the brother was stating. But, you know, I don't buy it. And I think that we have to really deal with the hard truth reality and not what's coming out of people's mouth.
Okay, anyone else want to comment on that before we go to the questions from the audience? All right. First question, and I won't be able to get to all of them, but I'll get as many as I can in. Given that the essentially capitalist, imperialist nature of the United States is not likely to change much in the next 4 years, what is one change the president could make if reelected within the system to benefit America's neediest citizens? And any one of you can take that. All right, JR?
I think one thing that he can do that's very much on the public consciousness is start arresting these police officers that are killing black people. You know, we have Kenneth Hardy right here in San Francisco. We have Oscar Grant dealing with Meserly, who did get arrested for a little while. But there was a recent report that I must say again that the Malcolm X grassroots movement did, where they said that every 36 hours in the United States, a black person is killed by law enforcement, security guards, or people perpetrating to be law enforcement, as we saw in the little brother Trayvon Martin. So I think that what he can do is he can start to prosecute these criminals that are killing black people wantonly, such as what happened with Aiyana Jones. You know, the little girl in Detroit that was murdered, basically, so 48 Hours can get a live graphic television show, but it went a little bit overboard once they burned her up with the grenade and shot her in the head, you know. But I think that that's one easy thing that he can do that wouldn't seem too radical.
And you do know the president has no arrest powers within a state, don't you?
Well, I also know that whatever the president points at usually gets handled. And I mean, the president of the United States probably has the most power of the press and the power of public opinion than anybody in this country.
Okay, so you're saying he should speak out on it, not actually make the arrest.
Well, I think he should speak out, and I think he should push Eric Holder, who works for him in the Justice Department, to make the arrest.
Okay, anyone else want to comment on that question? All right. Being the first black anything in our country has never, ever been easy. However, given the dire straits our country was in economically, did anyone on the panel believe there would be such obstruction to his attempts at economic success that could have been accomplished?
Did they believe that there would be?
Yeah, did anyone on the panel believe there would have been so much obstruction to the attempts he made to bring about economic success?
I believed it from the beginning. That is, I was convinced that his presidency, as I said earlier, would not amount to much because he would not have majorities in Congress to do anything. The Republican Party is now a conservative party, and they are committed to dismantling as much of the American welfare state as they can. Going back, they never liked it. They never liked the New Deal, Social Security, Medicare. And they have been intent since Reagan of using all the means at their disposal to dismantle it. And so they certainly were not going to participate in Obama's extension of it, which was his intent. So I knew there was going to be nothing but bitter division between the two parties. The most important outcome of this election is not what Obama will do, it is what he will prevent them from doing. If Romney and Ryan are elected, not only will they continue American foreign policy in the Bush manner, and more aggressive, they're itching to go to war in Iran and here and there. So we'll have the same foreign policy except worse under Romney, Ryan than under Obama. And they may have the votes to destroy Medicaid, the medical insurance program for poor people, which the president tried to expand. They are intent on turning that into a state-run limited budget program rather than an entitlement program that it is now. They're intent on doing the same thing to food stamps, so people will not have automatic eligibility to that. This is all in the Ryan budget. And they say they want to turn Medicare into a voucher. Plus, keeping the Bush tax cuts and reducing taxes on those wealthy persons even more in order to make substantial cuts in the domestic welfare budget. So this election is a very, very important election, not so much in terms of the president's agenda for the next 4 years. It's the agenda of the other side for the next 4 years. It is draconian, and it is an effort to undo much of the progress that was made from Franklin Roosevelt through Barack Obama in terms of his health insurance legislation.
Anyone else want to comment on that? Anyone else want to comment on that question? Okay. Did you? Okay. The next question. What has the president done while in office to focus on the high level of unemployment and undereducation of African Americans? Anybody want to take that?
Well, hardly anything.
Exactly, nothing.
But he has, Obama, of course, doesn't want to appear to be doing anything for black people, even when he is doing things for black people.
Wow.
So he, for example, issued an executive order establishing a commission on the education of African Americans. From his stimulus package, he put some money into that. He issued an executive order on affirmative action and hiring in the senior levels of the bureaucracy. He reversed a Bush executive order. The Bush executive order had encouraged colleges not to use race in order to broaden their pool of students, and he reversed that and directed college and universities to use race to allow students to get a chance to go to school. And he's done all these things.
And why is UC Berkeley as white as it is?
Well, the president doesn't run UC Berkeley, but
I'm just saying the UC system in general. If you believe that he's enforcing it, are you saying that he's enforcing it or recommending?
No, I think he's actually,
I think that's important.
Well, he's enforcing it to the extent that he can as president. But the first black president, just like the first Catholic president, has to lean over backwards to show that he is not engaging in favoritism toward one of his own. That's just the requirements of being elected. The first Catholic president, Jack Kennedy, did the same thing. He leaned over backwards to show Catholics that he could be, more Protestant than the Protestants. And President Obama is caught in that dilemma. The efforts that he has made to address those problems have been almost stealth-like efforts because he does not wish to arouse and antagonize people who already think that he is conducting the presidency in a way that's favorable to blacks. The health insurance plan, for example, if it is implemented, will disproportionately benefit blacks and Latinos. These are least insured today, and they will get the most benefits from that. And the president, if he wished, could go around saying to black people, look, health insurance is really a black program because black people are going to benefit from this.
Wait, before you start clapping.
Hold on. He's taxing essentially whites. Essentially, he's taxing whites in order to provide a benefit disproportionately to blacks and Latinos. Now, that is something, if you wanted to, he could brag about. But of course, if he bragged about it, it would in fact lead them to say, I told you so. I told you this man really was a subterranean Malcolm X trying to transfer resources from white people to black people. So that's just the dilemma of being a black president in a country that is white and a country that is not sympathetic to black people.
Anyone else want to comment on that question? Anyone else on the panel want to comment on that? Okay. Next question. Ann Coulter made an excellent point this morning about President Obama forgetting about the black vote and catering to the Latino vote. What can black people do to hold him more accountable?
Vote.
Yeah.
Right?
Register and vote. Register and vote. Educate, register, and vote. I can't say it enough. I grew up in the city, and I know that, it's so interesting that one of the things when I went away to college and came back to my community and just saw the changes and the loss of lives and just the lack of job opportunities, and I felt like I can't be the only one. And one of the things that I did was immediately started registering people to vote. I felt like this is where the power is. If we come together as a community and we use that voice as one, and we hold our elected officials accountable, and we're actively engaged, and we know what's going on, and we are working together, I mean, we can accomplish so much. And I just think that we as a community, it's easier to maybe look at Obama or look at, you know, someone else in a position of authority and say, you know, well, what are you going to do? And I just decided I'm going to look in the mirror and I'm going to say, well, what are you going to do at myself? And I think it's important that part of what we have to do is get into communities and register the people to vote. I've been on corners, I've been in all kinds of places, and this is just something that I've always been passionate about and what I always try to encourage young people to do. And so, I mean, I think a big part of it is, you know, and lastly, I'll say this, when I looked at the numbers, I've looked at the numbers in the past, I'm looking at the numbers now. Not only have we lost in San Francisco in particular, and even in the Bay Area as a whole, a significant African American population, I noticed that the numbers in concentrated African American communities, the voting patterns of African Americans is just shameful. And I think that we have got to step up.
Anybody else? Lynette?
You know, your question about, this question, is Obama neglecting the black vote and going after the Latino vote, and what is it doing to the black community? I look at that as one of those questions that the media is trying to really push out there to try to split us. Because guess what? I know I'm black. I know I follow Barack Obama. I don't need him to come to my community right now and tell me what he's going to do. I don't need him to do that. What I need him to do is win this race. And he has to do that by going after voters that aren't me. He needs to talk to people who aren't me. So this whole notion of let's divide them up. Let's say, okay, he's going to forget about black folks because there are more Latinos and they'll vote for that's wrong. And that's wrong-headed thinking, because I don't think we're neglected by Barack Obama. I think Barack Obama understands the needs of the black community. I think that he will eventually find us and do some of the right things. But right now, he's in the midst of probably the hardest race, and he needs to get out there and talk to folks who haven't made up their minds yet about voting for him. And if that's Latinos, if that's Asians, if that's whites, if that's Tea Party, whoever it is, I need that man to get out there and do it. I don't need him to come talk to me anymore.
Theo?
I just want to chime in on that. Lynette, very, very great point. I think President Obama knows that he has the black vote, especially considering his opponent. But I think, for me, I find that at least a lot of my peers and folks that I've grown up with, they're not as involved in politics as they should be. And if they are, they have the attitude, they vote with the attitude of, what have you done for me lately?
And they should.
Exactly. So I think, so going back to the what have you done for me lately? I think it's oftentimes blurred. That vision is oftentimes blurred because folks aren't as civically engaged. But at the same time, there needs to be a level at which Obama can show folks what the immediate rewards of what he's done. And I think that's very important to get him reelected, to folks like the Latinos, the LGBT, students. And it's figuring out how to emotionally charge these folks. So how do we get those folks involved in the elections? It's finding that spark, whether that for the LGBT, it's the marriage issue. So it's finding that issue for African Americans. It's finding that issue for students, for the Latino population. So,
Can I add something? I don't support this notion of what have you done for me lately. I support a notion of what have we done to impact people's lives in a positive way, whether it's looking at the mirror at yourself or embracing your community or working together or educating people or empowering them to do for themselves. I'm not sitting back waiting on President Obama or anyone else to take care of my community, because the devastation of what's happening in my community on the ground is happening now as we speak. And so I don't look for someone to do for me. I think it's important that we're empowering each other to do for ourselves and to come together as a community.
Can I respond? I just want to respond.
Hold on. No. Let me speak to this. One, I think it's very important that we acknowledge that we're on a panel talking about Barack Obama. So that's why we're talking about people that's representing us. I don't think, London, we're talking about our own individual resumes. I mean, this isn't about J.R. London or Lynette or anybody else. This is about what is the name of the panel is accomplishments, criticism, and commentary.
I've
so
read
I think that we need to address Obama when we're in this auditorium. So, Ms. Rodgers, what exactly is the question? Because I would like to hit it head on.
The question was, and before I give it to you again.
I wasn't answering, excuse me, Ms. Rodgers, I wasn't answering to the question. I was just making a comment. And I think that it's relevant to talk about Obama in this context, because when Obama was elected, the one thing that, from my perspective, I thought about as someone who is an American, as someone on the ground, is what can I do to help make our president a success? And part of what I'm saying in terms of what have you done for me lately has more to do with me saying, well, what have we done to contribute to making him a success, to holding him accountable, to doing better in our communities, especially around making sure that we have people out on the streets educating people on why voting is important, the history of voting, and making sure we get folks registered to vote. But more importantly, it can't be, well, what have you done? What have you done? It has to be, what have we done, too? And so my link has more to do with that. So for clarity, it's not about me. It's about what are we doing to make sure that our president is a success? But more importantly, what are we doing to make sure that our country is a success?
Yes, and to add to that, hold on.
Can I speak
add
to
to
it?
that, yes. I'm going to
They
give
cut
you
me
your,
off when I don't agree with their opinions.
You asked me a question, let me answer.
Okay. Yeah, let me go. Can I go?
JR, let me answer your question first, and then you can have your say. In terms of what we are talking about on the panel, yes, it is a panel about Barack Obama, but Barack Obama does not live in a vacuum. We have to talk about it in relationship to each of our own communities, and we're in this community, so I think what London said is very appropriate to talk about how that relates to Barack Obama. So now you wanted me to repeat the question. The question was, Ann Coulter made an excellent point this morning about President Obama forgetting about the black community and catering to the Latino vote. What can black people do to hold him accountable? That was the question.
Well, I think I want to address what Lynette said in dealing with just the straight numbers game. There's more Latinos in the United States than blacks. And as the brother Theo said, that he pretty much has the black vote. You know, he pretty much has that. So he's going after the other swing vote, which would be the Latino vote. So, I mean, I think just thinking in terms of strategy and not getting caught up in emotion, it makes sense what he is doing if he's trying to address a certain popular or a certain majority of a vote that will vote for him, or at least that it'll swing. So I think that in sticking with the question that you answered, Ms. Rodgers, I think that, you know, it's more of a strategy thing than it is an emotional thing at this particular point, even though I do feel like he does neglect black issues in the black community. But I think on this particular issue, it is an issue of strategy and numbers. And looking at 10%, black people being 10 to 13% of the United States population, and the United States population by 2050 being a majority Latino.
Okay. This question is specifically for London Breed and for JR. Have either of you traveled to Washington, D.C., stated your concerns or your hopes to the Justice Department via Eric Holder concerning the primary issues that plague and affect African American communities, not just merely in San Francisco, but African American communities across the country?
So the question is, have I ever been to the Department of Justice to address the issue?
That's what the question says.
No,
and
I haven't.
I suppose we could broaden it to say, have either of you made your views known in such a way that they might get to the people who make the decisions?
Yes, I definitely have made my views known to the Department of Justice through the Oscar Grant case in dealing with police terrorism, because the Department of Justice initially opened up an investigation into the Oscar Grant case that they never really did anything with. For those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, Oscar Grant was murdered 2009, face down on a BART platform on New Year's Day. After about a year and a half, 2 years, and after Oakland burned up about 5 different times, Obama addressed it, or actually Obama didn't address it. Eric Holder addressed it, and Eric Holder actually came to Oakland to address police terrorism, or let's not say address, to do some like political theater around police terrorism. And so, yes, I was in the crowd. Yes, I did sign petitions. And yes, I actively did make my voice known to the Department of Justice.
London?
I guess not in that way, but a couple years back, unfortunately, 5 of the kids that we work with at the African American Art and Culture Complex and our volunteer photography teacher was shot. I run an art center, a center that I went to as a kid, where it was like the place that you go to feel safe and to feel secure and to get support and to blossom in the arts. And because of this particular incident, I mean, we have been a sanctuary for a lot of these young men for many, many years. And at that point, I realized that we couldn't just operate as an arts facility. We had to operate as a place that provided opportunity. And part of what I did was applied for a grant. Part of what I did was made our, listed out all of our concerns, all of the issues, what the needs are. And we started this program where we brought kids together from various parts of, and when I say kids, we're talking about 16, 17, 18, 19. And part of the program was paying them a stipend, employment development opportunities, ballroom dancing, learning about, just life skills and basic things that are needed to get them back on the right track. And these are all kids that were unfortunately on probation and had other issues. The point I'm making is that this was a really small grant, and this is, in terms of the bigger population of the city, this is just targeted at just a very small number of young men at a time in terms of our capacity. And the issues that we have are larger, of course, than just a small area of San Francisco. And so bringing this issue to light to the U.S. Department of Justice is what I continuously try and do, and the police department and also community members, because sadly, when anyone is killed, it is a problem, whether it's law enforcement or whether it's someone else in the community. And so as someone who has witnessed this and has seen the community over the years just really go downhill considerably, and our African American boys and men be the targets, whether it's their own friends and family or the police, is never okay. And so we, from a national level, I think that they're aware of the problem, they just don't know what to do about it. Because putting a little bit of money in, and all of that money is used to pay stipends so that we can keep those boys actively engaged in the programs. But, sprinkling a little money here and there we all know is not going to solve the problem. We have to care about it first, and then we have to make sure that we have the capacity to aggressively address the problem, because we know what the problem is. We primarily, from my experience of being successful at what we've been able to accomplish by having kids in their second year in college at City College, San Jose State, working for DPW, and I mean kids that were headed down a completely different path. By having the success stories, we know what we can do, provide the opportunity so that they can take care of themselves. And again, you know, we have to have the will from the federal, state, and local levels.
Okay. We know that the huge turnout in the 2008 election did indeed make a difference in terms of electing Barack Obama, and that in 2010, when the turnout was not as great, that the Democrats lost a number of seats and the Tea Party got in. So can you talk about the importance of supporting the president through local elections? Voters seem to drop off like flies for local elections. And how does the state, voting for the state Senate and the House and all of these other local elections help at the national level? Any of you can take that. Anybody who wants to talk about voting? You did talk about it a little bit earlier. You did address the importance of getting involved.
At the local level in California?
Yeah, local. The question is about how the relationship between participating in local elections and those off-year elections, in other words, the non-presidential elections, because the numbers do drop off considerably in a non-presidential year.
Right. Well, on the local elections and this election, excuse me, because of the way the Electoral College is set up, it discourages participation in so many of the states from the top to the bottom. Obama clearly is going to win California by a fairly substantial margin. And so I think that is going to discourage people from voting who otherwise might be interested in his reelection, since they know that it's a foregone conclusion. And that might have a down ballot effect. That is, persons might then choose not to vote for the member of the BART board because they're not going to vote at all. And that affects Democrats here. But so that's just an unfortunate consequence of the Electoral College. I think people in California should turn out as if this is a battleground state, because some of the broadcasting models suggest that this is one of those elections, JR, where you can have, again, you said 6, it's actually 4 times a loser has actually won the presidency, and there's possibility that this election could hinge on that again, that a person could win the popular vote and lose the Electoral College. So I think that's the reason for it. In that sense, every vote counts, because in the aggregate total, the person who gets the most votes is at least going to have a popular Democratic claim to the presidency, whether he actually wins the Electoral College or not.
Anyone else want to talk about the importance of local elections and how it relates to the big picture? Lynette?
Well, I do, since the professor had to mention the BART board, and I think that's a very important race. But, you know, one of the things that we need to really be real about is the fact that in 2008, we had something different. We had the audacity of hope. We had Barack Obama against John McCain, and it was kind of the David and Goliath type thing. That can't happen again, meaning that happened already. We don't have that newness to it anymore. So that's what I'm finding very frightening right now, is that people aren't looking at Barack Obama's second term as something that they need to rush out and do. Mm-hmm. They're not looking at it as, well, I need to vote for him again. I did it one time. We have to really get folks educated to the fact that what you did in 2008 only lasted 4 years. Mm-hmm. We need you to come back and do it again. And I don't know how to get that newness back to it, but his election affects all the things that are happening on all the down races on the ballot, including the BART board. Because if people don't come out and vote for the president this time, then they're not going to hit all of the important things that I feel are on this ballot, including the supervisors races here in San Francisco. And these are real important races. I mean, the things that affect us locally, and I'm not going to harp on BART anymore other than billions of dollars of contracts. those have to go to folks who are here locally. That can't happen unless there's somebody fighting to make sure that happens. Barack Obama's election this year is probably more important because we've lost a lot in the last 4 years, and we can't continue losing. So we have to make sure that happens again, that we get that momentum built, and that Barack Obama gets reelected. If for no other reason, he should be president, but for the real reason, all of the down races on the ballot need to be addressed.
Anyone else want to comment on that before we go to the next question? Okay. Can you please talk about polls and whether they are representative or accurate? The media, for example, Fox Network, seem to distort the truth about polls. What are some reliable news sources, if any, that don't distort polls?
No, the polls are accurate. I mean, accurate in the range that they say they're accurate. Fox News, for example, to its dismay, the Fox News poll, the last two Fox News polls have shown Obama with a 5-point lead. Actually, the Fox polls have shown Obama with a greater lead than the other media. And of course, they regrettably have to tell us that, and then they go on to talk about something else because they don't want to discourage their listeners. But no, they're accurate within the stated margin of error, which is usually 4 or 5 points. And most of them tend to track each other in the outcome. They have slightly different question wording. Sometimes they ask lively voters, registered voters, things like that to give you these differences. If you take the aggregate of the polls, Obama is ahead within the margin of error, which is to say the race is essentially tied. So this is not any kind of distortion in the poll results. Poll results, I think, are reasonably accurate within the range of whatever the margin of error is, which is usually 4 or 5 points. So if the aggregate says that Obama is leading by 45, he could be leading by 49, or he could be leading by 41. So that's about.
Anyone else want to comment on? JR?
Being a member of the press, polls can be manipulated any way you want to see them manipulated. You can ask the questions, as a professor just said, a certain way. You can omit certain questions. You can concentrate on other questions and issues. So there's no accurate way to tell how people are going to act in a few months. It's just more a matter of you putting together some kind of survey and the people saying that this is what's going to happen. That's if you even trust that they're putting together a survey. I mean, I've never been surveyed by Fox News. Have you guys? So no one has been surveyed by Fox News. So I'm just saying, I just, call me suspicious, but I don't, I don't know if that's totally accurate in terms of when he's saying that the polls are accurate. Based on what?
Based on the number of people they polled.
There's no reason. I mean,
well, that's it. But that's it if they're being polled, Ms. Rodgers. I mean, the question is, all of these different polls that Fox News has done, why is it that no one in this room, have you ever been polled, Ms. Rodgers? Because I know you operate with the mainstream media.
I have indeed, but not by Fox News. You asked if I'd been polled by Fox News. I have not.
You've been polled by other mainstream media?
By Gallup and Pew. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
They have actually called my number at random and asked me questions.
Okay, you're the first person I ever met that's happened to.
Well, I got to remember that America has 300 million people, so I don't think you've met them all.
I've been an adult for about 15, 17 years, so I mean,
I know, but
maybe they're getting to me.
They may get to you.
Yeah, right.
In fact, the polls actually, there's so many polls that they act as a kind of internal check on each other. Because if a poll comes out with the results that's widely off what others are finding, then the credibility of the polling organization is called into question. So even if Fox News had some interest in manipulating it so as to get a results favorable to Romney, it really wouldn't work because the internal processes of one against another almost keeps them relatively in the same range. So all the polls are. I don't think a single poll has showed Romney ahead. So that's just a statistical thing. I don't think that's much.
Yeah, and as we've pointed out, it does have, a lot has to do with the questions that are asked. And one of the times that I was polled, there was a question that said, do you favor cutting spending or increasing taxes to solve the deficit problem? Well, they gave me only two choices, and my choice would be I favor doing both, and that was not an option. That was not a choice. So sometimes it has to do with the way the question is asked. So if everybody answered that choosing one or the other, then it would be a distorted view that you'd get, because you'd be saying, well, more people favor taxes or cutting spending, when really more people might favor doing both. But that was not a choice that was given. Okay, the next question. Can the panel speak to the role that the Obama family is playing as role models to the U.S.? Anybody want to talk about the Obama family as role models? Okay.
Well, I was not able to go to the inauguration in 2009. There was a lot going on within the organization that I work for, BART, so I had to stay in town. But on Inauguration Day, I had my 4-year-old niece and my 14-year-old niece, because I needed to have them watch what was going on. It was just that important. They still remember it. And they remember it not because we had a good time that whole day, but they remember it because of those two little girls, Malia and Sasha Obama. They remember it because they saw two girls who looked a lot like them. That was important to me, because when I grew up, I didn't have those kind of role models. What I had family, I had grandmother, mother, aunt, the whole 9 yards that way. But when I looked at what was out there public, I didn't have that. So I didn't know that my father could be the president. I couldn't think that way. Now their thinking has been expanded to the point where the sky's the limit. That's important to me, and I think that piece and the way that they have handled themselves while they've been in the White House, especially those two little girls. You don't hear a whole lot of them doing, actually you don't hear anything wrong. You hear about their school trips, you hear about the games that they play, you hear about their overnight adventures, but you don't hear about them sneaking out of the White House. You don't hear about them sneaking boys into the White House. You don't hear, well, maybe not yet, but it's just the idea that there seems to be this strong, and I do mean extremely strong, family structure there by Michelle Obama having her mother living there. There's a warden that's keeping her over those children, but it's working. But it makes me feel good that as a black family finally seated in the White House, we have something positive to look at, and I'm happy. And that's what I take away from the role, the image that they're leaving with me and my family.
Anyone else want to comment?
Yeah, I just want to second what Lynette, that you just mentioned is, I think for a lot of young folks, it's as simple as seeing what success looks like, seeing an African-American person in a position of power. And I think the family does the exact same thing, is seeing what a wholesome black family looks like. And I think a lot of times that's not something that's portrayed in mainstream media. And that's not something that a lot of folks grow up with. Mm-hmm. So,
anyone else want to comment on role models? Okay, then our final question is, I always like to leave people with something that they can do. London talked about this, that we look in the mirror. The president himself has talked about this on many occasions, including when he was running for office, during his inaugural address, during his address at the Democratic Convention, is that he does not do this alone, that this is a group effort. So with that in mind, I'd like for each of our panelists to just give us one suggestion, one thing, from whatever position you're coming from, whether you're voting for Obama or not voting for Obama, whether you're voting, not voting, one thing that you could do, that you would think the people in general could do to make a difference in how this country is run. One thing that you would suggest they do. And any one of you can start, but I'd like to have something from each one of you.
I'll be brief. I'll just say, don't be a spectator, be a participator.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, no, for some odd reason, I guess since I'm a lot more involved than a lot of folks I know, what I do is create small voter cards for folks and offer rides to the polls. So I usually take election day off. and I send either a mass text or a voter card with, what I think folks should vote for, and I and I get several phone calls throughout the day. Hey Theo, what am I voting for this year? So I make sure that at least everyone in my immediate surrounding gets to the polls.
Okay.
I would say tell people that this election is very important, probably the most important election since 1980. And it's not about Obama. It's about people who are trying to do things to poor people and working people that if Obama loses, they may be able to do, and it'll be very, very bad. So encourage people to vote. People in Pennsylvania, Ohio, places like that, tell them that this election is a very, very important election because of bad things might happen if Mr. Romney wins.
Okay.
Well, I think everybody has said what we should be doing. It's the voter education, it's to get out to vote, it's to tell everybody that this election is important, but that really is the low-hanging fruit. We have to get a culture of folks ready to know that voting is a right and a responsibility, especially in the Black community. We gotta get our kids to understand the importance of them voting all the time. And we can't do it once they turn 18. This has to be an ongoing educational process, something that we start early in elementary school, something that we keep going. I know there are a lot of educators out in the audience who do just that. Every election cycle, they're talking to their students about who to vote for and holding mock elections. The importance of that is tremendous, and I think it needs to continue. Like I said, the rest of it is kind of low-hanging fruit. We know as responsible people that we got to get out there and tell people, vote, register, vote, get out there. If we have to go bring you to the polls, we'll do that. But that only covers that one election. We got to get that mindset together where there's this new pathology in our children that they know going forward. They have to vote. It comes like clockwork. You just do it. And that's what I think we need to do.
JR?
I think that we need to educate ourselves as to what's at hand, what the issues are, how the system works. And I think we need to be politically active more than just in November during election day. I think that we need to have our eye and our ear on the pulse of what's happening internationally, whether we're talking about Obama and his foreign policy, or we're talking about, the foreign policy of the United States in general, or as well as the domestic policy. I don't think that we can afford to be led in a direction by Fox News, or take it out of Fox News. People who we know don't have our interests at hand. I don't think that we can afford to allow them to control the debate. I think that things like this, I want to commend, the San Francisco Library and the sisters that invited me for creating things like this, because a lot of times you don't hear outside of what is talked about on the mainstream. You just hear a different version of what's talked about in the mainstream. I think we need to make it our responsibility to be political 24/7, 365.
Okay. I'd like to thank again our panelists, Professor Robert Smith, London Breed, J.R. Valrey, Theo Ellington, and Lynette Sweet, so much for being here today, taking time out of your busy schedules.
Thank you, Ms. Rodgers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And for doing this today, and for the library for putting this on. I'll leave you with this quote. The late Congresswoman Shirley Chisholm said, "You don't make progress by standing on the sidelines." Don't be a watcher from the sidelines. Do get out and vote on Tuesday, November 6th. If you don't want to stand in line, get an absentee ballot and send it in beforehand, so you don't even have to get up early and go to the polls. You don't have to do anything. Just get your absentee ballot so that you know that you have voted, whichever way you're voting. I'm saying however you want to vote, just make your vote count, because every time you don't vote, you're giving an extra vote to the side you don't want, because basically you're canceling out. That person is canceling you out if you don't vote. So this is a very precious right fought for very hard by a lot of people, our ancestors, a lot of people who looked like us, got bloody noses, bloody heads, got killed, got thrown over into ditches for trying to vote. Now you don't have to worry about being shot if you go to vote. So please don't throw your precious right away. Thank you so much for being here today. And I think the organizers have one final comment to make. Oh, here she is. Have one final comment to make, and don't forget about November 6th.
Can you hear me? I would like to thank Barbara Rodgers. She was a wonderful moderator. Let's give her another hand. Thank all the panelists. I think we got a variety of views here, and we do need to go home and consider everything that was said today. I also want to inform you about a program next week. We're doing a film program on the 29th for our voter empowerment series called Films of a Movement. We'll be showing the films Freedom on My Mind. She spoke about Shirley Chisholm. We'll be showing her film, Chisholm 72. And also a film about the election of Barack Obama by the people. So if you have time next Saturday, it'll be shown right here in this auditorium. Saturday, yeah, the 29th. I also like to thank, let me get my notes here. I'd like to thank again the Black Women Organized for Political Action. If you haven't registered to vote, please go outside there and register. The ladies' names are Michelle Jocks, Gwyneth Borden, Lynette Sweet was a part of them as well, and Carol Bell Thomas. Thank you again to our panelists, J.R. Valrey, Dr. Robert Smith, Theo Ellington, and London Breed. And also thank you, Lynette Sweet, for stepping in last minute. I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. I'd also like to thank the African American Committee who helped put this on today, and the members that are here are Kai Wilson, Leon Veal, Chanetta Jackson, and Beverly Hayes. And the folks running the cameras, Kenny Avila from the AV department here at San Francisco Public Library, and Carolyn Lobert, is that right? From San Francisco gov.org, and hopefully we'll be able to see this online through that organization, right? At some point. And also the Friends of the San Francisco Library for sponsoring this whole event. And thank you all for coming out, and have a good evening. Thank you.